Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. Not actually sure how long this video will be because I don't know that I have a whole ton to say about this book because I've been reading it for a while. I don't want to ruin it for people, but I have finished the Simarillion, a wonderful classic of Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, and I have a very beautiful copy of it. Got a beautiful, lovely little ribbon there. My dust jacket's starting to look a little beaten up. I must have dropped this book one too many times. But the book itself still looks good. And it has my maps included. That's one of them. Here's the other one. That's probably upside down. But yes. This is the first time I have actually finished the Simarillion all the way through. The first time I tried to read the Simarillion, it was a very long time ago, and I just couldn't get into it. I hadn't started reading mythology at that point, and the style, it wasn't like The Lord of the Rings, which has got a very narrative story style, and the language was a bit more distant, and I just could not connect. Years later, I started reading Norse mythology and some Greek mythology, more Norse, but Greek as well. And after that point, the Simarillion clicked for me. And especially with my studying then of medieval English history, particularly touching on Anglo-Saxon history, I could see Tolkien's influences in the Simarillion as I began to reread it, or began to read it, attempt to read it again. So I started this in 2021 for the second time. And it's taken me a while because I've been reading other books, and also I wanted to give it my full attention when I was reading it, because I knew there was a certain point where I was coming close to the Beren and Luthien story, and I wanted to fully enjoy the Beren and Luthien story because I had been highly anticipating it. Oh, that was the other thing. TolkienTube got me wanting to read Simarillion as well. And I still follow a few channels on TolkienTube. I follow Jess the Shire and Girl Next Gondor. There's a guy I also follow, I can't remember his name right now, but I don't tend to watch him quite as often. His videos do tend to be a bit more, they give a little bit more of a scholarly feel. They're a little bit less conversational. I'm not sure if that has to do with the fact that he's a lawyer, so I'm not sure if that, if he sometimes gives the feeling of being a bit pedantic. But he obviously enjoys what he's talking about. And if I feel like he delves a lot more into themes of what are some, he delves more into theories, and not theories in kind of almost more philosophical ideas behind it. That's why if I have to be really I want maybe a deeper thinking video to watch when I want to watch his. And I can't pull his name out for the life of me. Whereas the ones from Girl Next Gondor and Jess of the Shire, while being insightful, are something I can watch or listen to while doing other things and really kind of keeping half an ear on it. It's not quite the same focus where it just feels different. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So like I said, this is my second attempt to read the Simarillion, and examining history and mythology helped me, especially with the style of Simarillion, which once you read mythology, you're like, oh, this is very much of a mythology style of writing. That's why it doesn't match something like The Lord of the Rings or any other narrative book, because it's not supposed to be that. This is supposed to be the lore of the elves and a bit of men, as passed down through the ages. This is not supposed to be something that's going on current day. It's a book of mythology. It's a book of history. And I mean, Tolkien was trying to create legends, myths and legends for mythology for England, much in the vein of Arthur, which kind of was more Welsh in nature, even though I think a lot of people associate it more with England now. And he just kind of had always felt like, well, we need our own, and this was his attempt to create that. I think he did quite a nice job, even though I don't think that if you're the casual fan, I don't think you necessarily realize that that was what he was going for. I kind of feel like if you were to point to a central theme, besides that of one's fate, there is a underlying thread of disastrous consequences of pride and hubris. Those who are humble, who are not putting themselves first, they not only are shown in a better light, they have the favor of Iluvatar and the Ainar, the Maya. Those are unequivocally your good guys. Now you will have people who are a bit more complicated, like Turin, where they fall, their pride and their hubris and their inability to sometimes, their choices end up being the cause of their own worst things that happen to them in their lives. Not a lot of the horrible things that happen to Turin, outside of, the whole Melkor has cursed Hurin thing. So yeah, in spite of everything being set off by that, Melkor's desire to see Hurin and his bloodline suffer, that did not come, even though that was in place, it was still Turin's own choices that caused the worst things that happened to him. His own pride, his own hubris. And if he had faced the same trials, if he had still been in some of the same situations, some of the same, faced the same world and the same trials that he did in the actual story, if he had faced them with less of an idea of pride or arrogance, then I don't think he would have ended up as he does at the very end of his story. And I don't want to do too much, because if you have not read the Simarillion, and this particular section is covered in even more detail in the children of Hurin. I'm not actually sure how it's pronounced. I don't want to ruin that story for you. It really is a classic tragedy, though. And I find Turin to be a very frustrating character. Kind of in the way that I sometimes feel about the Fëanorians. Just, again, the whole idea of pride and an unwillingness to just submit to, and I don't mean like submit as a negative thing, but like, for example, for the Fëanorians, they could have at any point been submitted to the will they could have submitted to the will of Erolivitar. They could have um, given up their oaths to take back the Simarillions no matter what. Because they were given an out. They were given a way back home. Back to Arda. And back to the Undying Land. And they chose not to take it because of their pride. So this little thread runs through this story. Every tragedy, every major tragedy that has a ripple effect through the story seems to be preceded by someone's pride, someone's hubris. Even if the pride is Melkor's, that is the underlying theme. And I mean, this is a creation story. Besides with having influences of Norse mythology and of Anglo-Saxon history, you have Tolkien's Christian, particularly Catholic, influences with Tolkien being Roman Catholic. So then you have the Christian creation story. So that includes the fall of Satan, which is a story of pride. And Melkor's is a story of a fall due to pride. Sauron's is a story of fall due to pride. It's just a line, a thread through Tolkien's story of the Simarillion. It's very interesting to see that thread as you're reading. And I think this really hit me, particularly with the Turin story. And it's like, if only you had been able to step aside from your pride, what would your life have looked like? I mean, Ale, so all these different characters. What if you had stopped? What if you had said, it's okay. I don't need to. I can step down. I can go in. What is the Galadriel quote? I will be diminished, and I will no longer be a queen, but Galadriel, and I will go into the West. I'm saying it wrong because it's a quote from Lord of the Rings, and I don't have my Lord of the Rings, my Fellowship of the Ring copy right here. I can hear it in my head. I have passed the test. No, this is a movie quote more. I have passed the test. I will be diminished and not be a queen, but Galadriel. Essentially, I will go into the West. But yeah, Galadriel at that point, hers was a story of, yes, and there's different versions of Galadriel's story about why she's still in Middle Earth at that point. There are tones of kind of pride aspects to it, depending on what era Tolkien is in the writing Galadriel's story. And so again, she could have taken that ring and become a not a Dark Lord, but a queen, dark and terrifying in her own right. But she chose to be diminished and to become merely Galadriel. But characters like Turin, characters like Feanor, Feanorians in general, different characters throughout, they could have chose to even be diminished just a little bit. Just a little bit. Okay, I did not manage to take the Silmarils back. So I stepped down a little bit. And then Turin, his life is a whole realm of different things where he could have stepped down a little bit, stepped back a little bit, sacrificed his pride just a little bit, could have been diminished just a small bit, and his story might have not been so tragic. So I just find that to be interesting. Numenor is another story of where something that starts off as good gets corrupted by pride and ends in disaster. And only those who are not corrupted by the pride, who still submit to Eru Iluvatar, who still do not see themselves, their will as being paramount, their pride as being paramount, don't see themselves as being greater than they actually are. Those are the ones who manage to go on past Numenor, who manage to found the house that eventually leads to Gondor, leads to having Aragorn, the line that leads to Aragorn. There are so many things that, yes, it's a nice thread that's throughout, and I felt like that really is part of what ties this story together, are these themes of unchecked pride and disaster, and humility leading to better things, or, even if bad things happen, there is still hope with the people who have a level of humility versus unchecked pride. So yeah, I very much have enjoyed the Simarillion, much more than I thought the first time that I picked up this book many years ago. No, not this particular book. I have a paperback version downstairs. This is my shiny copy that I picked up in 2021. So, newish copy. My paperback, my old beaten up paperback that I got used, it's downstairs along with my other beaten up paperbacks that I got used, the rest of Tolkien's, The Hobbit and his trilogy. So those beaten up paperbacks are downstairs, and I won't get rid of those either, just because I've written in them. I have in appendices where they mention when people were born. I've scratched in what age characters were during different parts of the story, because that was important to me for some reason. But yes, that's a Simarillion, and I'm actually not sure how long this video is. Well, if this ends up being a shorter one, yay, everyone likes a shorter video every once in a while. Thank you very much for joining me today for this little review of the Simarillion. If you have not read the Simarillion, I do recommend it. Even if you have already read The Lord of the Rings, even if you've already read The Hobbit, I don't think that you need to have read either of those to get the full effect, because it really is, it does stand alone just fine on its own, because that's how Tolkien intended. This is the history of this world long before any of the characters who are mortal are born yet. Now, granted, you have elves and stuff, they were born. Most of your elven characters are already around at this point. I think the only one who might not be is Legolas. Although we don't know, because, they don't cover as much the Mirkwood elves. So, you're going to hear the bread machine in the background. Sorry, I'm trying not to be distracted by the bread machine myself. My dad has cheese bread going every time our priest comes in to bring me to do confession with me once a month, because I have trouble leaving the house due to being mostly homebound. So they make him bread every time he comes in to share the rectory. So he's making cheese bread this time in the bread machine. And I'm probably going to be very distracted by the bread machine, just because that paddle noise. Anyway, where was my thought process go? What was I talking about? Curse you, bread machine. Let's see, I was talking about... You see, if you guys were in the room with me, you could have told me what I was thinking about. I'd be like, yeah, that's right. Or you could have been like my mom and I when we have a normal conversation. She'd be like, I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. Or I don't know where you're going with that. And we've both done that to each other, but we're very unhelpful when we lose our train of thought. Okay, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, you don't need to have read Tolkien's other works prior to reading the Simarillion. You can jump into the Simarillion. If you love mythology, it's just fine. It's fine to start there first. But if you want to maybe start a little bit slower, I started with The Hobbit for a long time. The Hobbit was my favorite. I then went into the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think for me, The Hobbit was just a style that was a bit easier to connect to as a kid. And then, because there's all the music and stuff, I mean, there is music in Hobbit as well, but there's definitely one is The Hobbit was initially supposed to just be a fun adventure story that doesn't have a whole huge overarching theme in the way of the Lord of the Rings books, which are very dark books, in spite of themes of hope and all the other pity, mercy, all those themes that are good that are in there. That, in spite of all that, it is a dark story of wars, and while there is a battle in The Hobbit, there is a certain grittiness in The Lord of the Rings, and I can see where Tolkien's experiences in the war affected the way that he wrote The Lord of the Rings, because war was a very real thing to him. But I have found, and this I think is where my thought process is going, since becoming more aware of the lore of Middle Earth, there are things that I didn't pick up on before on other readings of The Lord of the Rings, in particular, not necessarily The Hobbit, because he kind of tied that in as an afterthought to his world, because it wasn't initially something that he was thinking of making a part of his Simarillion, the world of Middle Earth. He wasn't planning on making that all one thing. The Hobbit was his own thing, and then when he was asked for more, he just tied it all into this greater world that he was already building. So, yeah, I found that certain things, well, there's a point where there's talk of Beren and Luthien. I didn't know really what that was about previously. There's just, I think that, as I recall, it's been a little while since I've read about it, they talk about Beren and Luthien a bit when they are on Weathertop, as a way to kind of, because Aragorn didn't want to tell a darker story at that point, because they had asked him to tell, if I remember correctly, about the ring wraiths a bit more. And he's like, or it's another dark story they wanted to tell him. I don't remember which one. He's like, I don't want to have that conversation here. And I think, if I remember correctly, that's where he told a little bit about Beren and Luthien. And just other references throughout that are thrown in different places that I'll be like, oh, I got that reference. This now has more depth. So yeah, this, well, even when, yeah, I don't want to say too much more than that. There's just things all throughout that you get more of the subtleties when you realize more about the background of the world that Tolkien has built, even if while you're reading the book, you can read the book of The Lord of the Rings at surface level. You just get that much more depth when you have the Simarillion on top of it. I have a bunch of other more detailed books of Tolkien's to read. I have Beren and Luthien. I have Fall of Numenor, Fall of Gondor. I have The Children of Húrin, Unfinished Tales, Lost Tales 1 and 2. I want to say there's Morgoth's Ring. A bunch of the other, like, history of Middle Earth type books. So I do look forward to jumping into that more. Now I am finished with my fake out ending that I did earlier. I am truly ending this video now. Thank you very much for joining me. Hope that you have a wonderful day, and I will see you for the next video. God bless. Bye.